Check it out.
Hello, listeners. I am so happy to be here today. As always, we have a very special guest. Deanna Mackey is one of the most decorated guests that we have had on this podcast. Working at KPBS for nearly 26 years now, having been CEO since June of 2022. Mackey has made many inspiring strides with a commitment to women and girls, particularly women of color, both in and out of multimedia work. She created One Book, One San Diego, a KPBS partnered literary program. She co founded Public Media Women in Leadership, a mentorship program that prepares women with the skills to become future COOs and CEOs. And she is with me here today to talk all about it. Please give a where you at welcome to Deanna Mackey. How are you feeling?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good.
I usually like to just drive into things right away, start talking about, where we are, KPBS, and your time at SDSU. So tell me a little bit about it. How was your time at SDSU?
It was great. I came here as a sophomore from Sac State, and at that time I was studying political science. And I came here and I thought, I really like journalism. I had been a writer in high school and I wanted to pursue that as well. So I decided to do a double major in journalism and poli-sci. And it was fantastic because right away there were opportunities. The Daily Aztec was there. So I signed up to be a writer, a reporter. And not too long after that, a few months later, I learned that KPBS was hiring for an editorial assistant. And I was familiar with public media from growing up. So I, at that time, came over to the building, which was not this beautiful building we're in today, because this was 1985. We had a converted apartment building. That's where the Trader Joe's sits today. And I went to have my interview there and I got the job and I became an editorial assistant for On Air Magazine at the time.
That's too wonderful. Why did you choose SDSU?
Well, I chose SDSU at the time primarily for love. I was following my boyfriend and we had met in high school sweethearts, and we'd been apart for our freshman year and we wanted to find a school that fit both our majors. And San Diego State did that. So I came here.
That's wonderful. A very unlikely story, but a very lovely one considering where you are now. How did your time at SDSU set you up for your career afterwards?
Yeah, I've told people this story often that I don't think I could have picked a better school as far as the combination of what I learned in the classroom, but also so many work opportunities and internship opportunities. Besides the Daily Aztec, where I worked for 4 years and was the editor my final year, I had the 2 years at KPBS. I did a couple of PR internships. I did freelance writing. So there were just so many opportunities to try different things. And then in the political science department, I was in one of the clubs where we went around the state and competed. I think it was like Model United Nations or something like that. So I had a whole group of friends from that community. And when I graduated, I was not worried about getting a job. I had learned literally to run a magazine from working at KPBS. I knew how to run a small newspaper because back in the day, the Daily Aztec was very different from what it is today. And what I mean by that is I was working there when newspapers were having their heyday. So it was a complete business. The whole newspaper was self-funded through advertising. And we had like 100 staff members, reporters, editors, graphics people. Back then you had to lay out the newspaper on boards and use X-Acto knives and cut out letters if something was spelled wrong and put in the right letter. And we would be in the back shop till midnight sometimes putting the paper to bed and then getting it to the printer. And the advertising department was right across the hall and they had like 25, 30 people. In fact, the guy that ran advertising when I was the editor, Matt Davey, is still involved in this community.
Mm.
And it was, you were 21 years old running a small business, basically. And I learned so much from that. Also, I also learned how to hold my own and like speak truth to power, because I don't know if it's this way today, but I had to meet every month with Dr. Thomas Day, who was the president, and he was a very exacting person. And I remember I would go with my opinion editor, and you'd go into his office, and he had a stack of the newspapers on his desk, and they were circled and read. And he spent the whole hour with us, grilling us about our coverage and what he thought was fair, which wasn't much, everything he thought was unfair. And I had to learn and remember that I'm in this space because I am the editor representing the voice of the students. And it's okay for me to push back to the president of the university when I'm in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, you can't learn that anywhere else. Like, I mean, it was such an extraordinary thing. So when I graduated, I got a job right away, and it was great.
I mean, you juggled so much, and you've seen journalism grow, really,
Mm-hmm.
to cutting things out meticulously, changing every word need be. How does that feel?
Knew where we are today.
Yeah, considering how much it's grown.
That's an interesting question. I love digital media.
Mm-hmm.
I love social media. I love technology. So I embrace all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I think there have been things lost in the sense of community in journalism circles. And what I mean by that is when you have to work together to make sure that publication gets finished, and not just the writing and the editing, but again, laying out the newspaper, getting it to a printer, making sure the art, all of that, which of course, when you have a digital product is similar, but it's so much faster when you have a digital product. So I don't think that sense of community that I feel like we had working at that newspaper together, I think it's harder to create that.
Now, you studied both political science and you studied journalism during your time at SDSU. Where did the love for both come from, and why did things lean a little bit more to journalism?
Because that's a great question too. So when I was in middle and high school, I studied French and Spanish, and by the time I graduated from high school, I spoke French fluently.
Really?
And yes, and I don't anymore.
That's okay.
And my parents, I told them what I wanted for my graduation, and we were a very modest family. And I'm 17 and don't know any better, and I said I want to go to France. And I was raised very Catholic and very strict family. My late mother was from Nicaragua. And my father, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Haven't talked about her in a bit.
Understood. I'm sorry to hear that.
My late father was Irish American. And so they were very, very strict and very religious. So I was invited, or I was told them I wanted to go to France. And they said, okay, well, we're going to have your old French teacher help us put this trip together. And I was sent to a Catholic university. I was 17 years old, me and my friend and I, and we went to Paris to this Catholic university where we were embedded with international students for a month. And it was amazing. And so I studied French there, became more fluent. We traveled all over France and Switzerland. And when I went to Sac State, it was because I wanted to be a diplomat. And my plan was I wanted to be the ambassador to France. And I knew to get there, I was probably going to have to work in some other smaller countries that spoke French language first. So that was the whole plan. But in high school, I had written for the high school newspaper, and I had written for the high school literary magazine. I was in a club with other aspiring creative writers, and I loved that. So when I went to San Diego State, I thought, I really want to do this writing thing too. So I added journalism, and I just fell into journalism quicker once I got to San Diego State. I also, when I got here, I was still studying French and Spanish, but in San Diego, French was not a very supported language. So after about a year, I had gotten so high in my levels, I was getting really confused because they're similar languages. So I dropped the French and I just kept studying Spanish and leaning into journalism.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope to see maybe the French community grow in San Diego.
But it's funny about the diplomat thing. When I was the COO here under the previous CEO, this question came up about my why I ended up in journalism and media. And he said, well, he goes, you basically did become a diplomat. You became the diplomat of KPBS. And he used to always call me that because a lot of my job was helping different departments, see each other's point of view.
I was going to say that you have had some pretty inspiring big goals from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's true.
But why?
So an interesting thing I think about my upbringing is it was very family oriented. It was very Catholic. It was very, in my opinion, strict. However, and somewhat patriarchal. My parents never told us they had two daughters. They never said, you have to do traditional things. They never said, that path isn't for you. So anything we were interested in, we were encouraged to try and to do. And I was a very good student and I loved to read. And when I got into high school and it was clear I was going to go to college and have these opportunities, my parents were like, sure, you should do that. You should try that. So I think that told me having aspirations was the right thing to do, that there was nothing that could stop me. I had to work hard. And my father was a very hard worker. So I think I watched his work ethic and my mother's just being so inspiring and thinking, well, you can do whatever you want to do as long as you work hard.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, what a wonderful dynamic to be able to have people that support you in that way and show you that having big dreams is something you should do.
Yeah,
most definitely.
So. I was lucky.
And moving past your time at university, fresh out of SDSU, what did your career look like?
So when I graduated, I got a job right away at a radio station called KSDO. It used to be the primary news radio station here in San Diego. This was long before KPBS had the footprint that it has today. And it was commercial radio. And my friend who worked with me at the Daily Aztec, she was a year or two older than I am. She vouched for me and gave me a reference. So I got a job as a news writer. I loved the job, but the hours were dreadful. So I worked 11 to 8, 3 days a week during the week. And then on the weekend, 11 in the morning. That wasn't bad. But on the weekend, I worked 3:30 in the morning to 11:30 in the morning.
The night shift.
Yeah. And it was so hard. I remember going to bed and crying because I couldn't fall asleep and knowing I had to get up in a few hours. And then the editor I worked with at the time on the weekend, the weekday was all the high level professionals and you were immersed in amazing learning and amazing experiences. And I still know some of those people that I worked with there. But oh my God, in the weekend, I would get to work and the editor was a very unorganized person. And it was when we had dot matrix printers and I would write the news and he would edit it and then he would need to print it out and it would go and it would print out one light at a time. And the anchors were just like in this room we're in, on the other side of the glass, banging on the glass because they wanted the news brought to them. And he would rip out the paper and it would tear in half and he'd start screaming. And I'm a very low key person. And I'd be like, oh my God. And I'd be running for tape and finding tape and helping him tape it up. And then we would open the door and we would throw the paper at them and they would grab it. It was like a scene from Broadcast News. It's probably, you're too young to know what that movie is, but you should watch it. It's funny.
Noted.
And it was a zoo. So I did that for maybe a year and I just couldn't do it anymore. And I went to the leaders of the radio station and said, well, I want not a raise. I want a promotion. I want to be a producer so I can just work during the day. And they said, oh, no, we don't do that for people unless you've been here 2 years. And I said, well, I'm leaving. So I left.
Boom, understood.
Yeah.
And did that take you to a better place, hopefully?
Yeah, another really interesting experience. I went to a startup magazine. So there is a company, I don't know if they're still active here in town, called the Bridal Bazaar, where they put on big trade shows for people getting married, like one-stop shopping, where you go find out about your flowers and your cake and your venue and your musician. They wanted to start a magazine that would come out quarterly here in San Diego that told people about all the different types of experiences you could have, from engagement to bachelor and bachelorette parties to your wedding. And they wanted to produce the magazine here, Arizona, in Inland Empire.
Okay.
So I was hired as the editor, and it was so much fun. I got to hire everybody, the art director, the advertising people were taken care of, but I did all the editorial stuff. And so I managed this magazine and wrote and edited and planned and organized and all that. And then because they had these bridal fairs, I would then do public relations for the brand. So leading into each bridal fair, I would go on like the morning news and talk about trends in weddings and trends in marital things, and it was a lot of fun. I did it for 2 years, and during that time I got engaged to the man I followed to San Diego, and this is where the story gets not so great.
Oh no.
So we got married, and the whole team from the magazine came to the wedding, and it was in San Francisco, which is where I was born and grew up in that area. And we had this great honeymoon, and we come home, and I go to work, and the doors are locked.
Oh,
And I'm knocking on the doors, and the owner's son comes to the door, and he says, I'm so sorry, Deanna, but we weren't making enough money on the advertising, so we had to shut down the magazine. So they'd let go of my whole team. And I'm like, what do you mean? I don't have a job, and we just spent all this money on the honeymoon. It's like, no, you don't. I said, well, here's the thing. I said, you can't let me go this quickly, because I've signed contracts on your behalf for the printing and for the distribution. And those contracts need a 30-day, notice. So you need to hire me back for like 6 weeks so I can close out the organization. So he did.
Good.
And I closed it out. And then I spent a couple of years doing freelance writing, freelance editing, which I really enjoyed, and things like that, until late in, I think it was 1990, 1991, KPBS called and said, we'd like you to apply for a job.
Amazing. What was that position?
That position was to be the managing editor of the magazine at KPBS that I had worked for a few years before as a student assistant. So, and it was a part-time job. So I took the job, I applied, they chose me, and I did that part-time for 2 years while continuing to do freelance writing, which I really enjoyed. And then at that point, the person who was the general manager saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and that was leadership capacity. And even though I'd been the editor of the Daily Aztec, when you have that job, it's a wonderful experience, but you think, well, that's just a fluke in your college career. I never saw myself as, after that, then running another media organization. I just wanted to write and edit. So, which is what I was doing, and I was loving it. And he said, I want you to take this other job, do it for 2 years, because then I want to make you a manager. I'm like, I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to manage people. I don't want to do that. And I kept saying no to him. And one day he came in and he said, we're going to get rid of your job, so there won't be a job. So you either apply for this other job or you won't work here anymore. So I was really upset, because I loved working here, but I didn't want the other job. Did it anyway. I took the job. I did not like it. So I did a job I did not like for 2 years. It was very rough. But at the end of 2 years, I was promoted to become a director. And I was very young still. I was maybe 26 then.
Wow, congrats.
And in the meantime, all the things that he had told me, the reason he wanted me to apply for the lower level job to get me ready for the higher level job, I started to see he was right. Like I didn't manage people at that point, but I influenced people, and
Mm,
I would see ways to help people do their jobs a little better or easier, and I was giving that guidance, and to me that was just a natural thing to do. But he was seeing the beginnings of somebody who could lead
mhm.
a much larger, experience, and so yeah.
What would you say is the difference between maybe the leadership roles that you've had, maybe at the Bridal Magazine and Daily Aztec, and what then you were doing for KPBS at the time, and what is different about management to influencing?
Um, some of it is the same.
Hmm.
Some of it is the same in that people, if you don't have the title and the power, people have to trust you to want to follow you. So they have to trust that you're giving them advice, um, that will actually help them or in their best interest, or they have to trust because they've seen how you behave and how you
Hmm.
show up, and they want to be like that too. So
Hmm.
they trust you. I think when you have the position, in many cases people don't have a choice if you have the title and the power, but I think good leaders understand that influence is much more important than title and power.
Of course, and I'm guessing it's this thought process and these kind of values that brought you up to a position to where you are now.
Yes, I think so. When I took that first, or was appointed in that first management position at
Hmm.
KPBS many years ago, I enjoyed it. I was learning a lot. I had a great boss. Everything was great. And then unexpectedly, my boss, who was at that time, we called them associate general
Hmm.
managers. Today, we call them chiefs. So she was essentially like a vice president to the CEO of KPBS, or general manager of KPBS. She left, and I was asked to step into her role. And ended up being the youngest person in that senior level role at the organization in the history of the organization. I was probably 12 or 13 years younger than anyone else on, we call it the management council.
Hmm.
I had only had one of my three children, so I was still having children, and I was only one of two women. It was very, very challenging. I had a lot to learn about how a dynamic like that works and how to fit into it. And the people that were on the management council with me, I knew them, but I knew them as higher level bosses. I didn't know them. Now I was their peer. So I think having these senior management experiences so young
Hmm.
helped me a lot for where I am today, because by the time I got into even, other levels of leadership, I'd already had a lot of the
Hmm.
experiences along the way. And yeah, and it's today, I, like I said, I never, when I worked here in the 80s as an editorial assistant, I never anticipated having this job. But by the time the opportunity came, when the university had hired a search firm and they called me in 2021 and said, we'd like you to apply, I was ready, and I
Hmm.
understood, what the expectation was, because I, at that point, I had been in management roles 35 years, something, a long time. So,
I mean, how does it feel getting into all these positions so young? You're saying that it's something that helped you.
yeah, it was really hard. I mean, it was really hard because nobody, well, in the very beginning, I wasn't given any training.
Hmm.
I wasn't, I didn't really know what I was doing except what was instinctual.
Hmm.
And some of the people who were other leaders around me, I didn't want to lead like them. I knew that was not how I wanted to lead. Um, I had some interesting interactions with people that
Hmm.
weren't great, because I felt taken advantage of, but I wasn't going to allow that to happen. So I
Hmm.
had to draw the line with people, and that was very difficult. And I was also, I was a woman, I was Latina. I'm not a very big person, so I don't show up, with a lot of physical presence. Um, I was young. I was
Hmm.
very young. And so I wasn't taken seriously a lot of times. And I had to learn how to hold my own. I learned a lot of things in meetings, like trying to speak up and not getting a chance to
Hmm.
talk. So I learned this trick, and I've taught so many women this, where I would wait until the end of the conversation. And then usually the leader or the facilitator would say, well, does anyone else have anything to say before we go on to the next topic? And I would always raise my hand then and say, yeah, I have a few things. And I did that enough times where people started to go, oh, she does have good ideas. She does have things we should pay attention to. So it took a while, but eventually, I was able to, in my own way, um, get the attention that I felt I deserved
Hmm.
with the experience I had. But I was refusing to do it as a bully, or I was refusing
Hmm.
to do it as a bombastic person. That's not how I show up, and I just wasn't going to
Yeah.
be that person.
I mean, having started so long, having started so young, you understood, number one, what you like in a leadership role, and
Hmm.
number two, what you don't like in a leadership
Yes.
role. I completely understand that. How would you describe what you do now as a CEO?
It's completely different than anything else I've ever
Hmm.
done. And what's interesting is 10 years ago, in my second round working
Yeah.
at KPBS, I was the COO to the general manager.
Hmm.
And I worked really closely with him. I went on lots of donor calls with him. I thought I really understood what this job was. But when I got this job and I had had it for about 6 months, I realized, wow, it's so different than I expected. And that is mostly because there's aspects of the job. I don't know how else to say this. People who love, and there are many who love KPBS, see my role with through a lens of celebrity.
Mm.
I do not, and I don't. I'm very uncomfortable. I was especially at the beginning uncomfortable with that,
Okay.
and I had to learn that it's not me personally.
Mm.
I embody a position that represents a place to them that they love so much that when I'm with them in community, they're like giddy and they're excited because they want to talk to me
Yeah.
about all the things we do, all the people that work
Hmm.
here. What does so and so look like who's on the radio? All those things. Have I met so and so? What's happening with this? Their favorite programs. And that is such, like, to me, this blessed place to
Hmm.
be in, to work for a media organization that people love so much that they are excited when you're at their table. They're excited when you walk into a room. I go to events and I always introduce myself to people, and they always say, I know who you are. And I say, well, but I don't know who you are. And I want to tell you who I am and you tell me who you are.
Mm.
And I have to keep doing that because I think it's important that they understand I don't take for granted that part of the role. And it's just something that I'm carrying for them.
Hmm.
I'm carrying and protecting the space that they care so much about until I give it to the next person. But that was one thing that was really different. And then the other is the hours.
Hmm.
I knew it was an intense job, but I work 50 to 60 hours a week. It is very, very intense. And especially now, since we've lost our federal funding,
Yeah.
I am meeting with donors, going to events, doing public speaking, speaking to the staff. It is nonstop. But it's for a service and a purpose that I care deeply about. And I would not have worked here 3 times if I didn't think this place was a place of value. So,
Of course, you're not just a figurehead and you're not just a leader, but you're a really hard worker too. Um, what does your work look like on a day-to-day basis? What can we expect from the CEO of
yeah,
KPBS?
every day is different. I spend about 70% of my time in some form of what I call development. So
Mm.
that's fundraising and engagement with community. So that could be calls to donors or sponsors, events, public speaking, lunches, meetings. And then the other percentage I spend with team members. So I have a lot of meetings with my executive team, and one level below them is directors. There's a set group of directors whose positions are such that I feel I need to have, one-to-one connection
Hmm.
with them on a regular basis. So I meet with them monthly. We have certain, departmental meetings. We do a lot with our leadership team, who's one level below the executive team. We meet with them twice a month and we do trainings with them. So a lot of leadership management trainings. Um, we do an all staff meeting every
Mm.
month. We do something called GM chat once a month, which is an informal, anybody can show up, they can ask me anything. So I try to be very accessible to staff too. I think that's very important. And we're very, very transparent about what we're doing, how we're running the place. So it's a mix of community, external relations and community relations, and then meeting with the team members who
Hmm.
are doing all the work,
Hmm.
and then just being out at events a lot.
More so in the life of a CEO, I want to talk a little bit about the Public Media Women in Leadership program
Hmm.
that you co-founded. Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, it's so inspiring to climb up the ladder and then behind you put multiple ladders so that others can do the same. Why is it important to you to be that kind of mentor?
Yeah, well, it was really important to me to found that, and that was 10 years ago. We're celebrating
Amazing.
our 10th anniversary.
Congrats.
Yeah, and I'm very excited. A year ago, we hired our first executive director, and actually, at the end of this month, I'm the board chair. I will term off the board, and I'm leaving my organization,
Hmm.
and essentially giving it back to the board and the
Hmm.
executive director to run. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want the organization to be so tied to me, because I want it to outlive me, in the sense that women needing community and support for their career journeys doesn't end when I leave public media, or leave this earth. And I didn't want it as tied to me, but I co-founded it with my friend, who sadly 6 months after we founded it, she left the industry, but we're
Mm.
still friends.
Amazing.
But because there was nothing like this for us. Like, we really struggled coming up in the industry that was very, very heavily male and mostly white males running public media for decades. So that was one of the reasons. Another was I had been on these panels in the 2 years leading into starting PMWL. I'd been on these panels where I was asked to speak from the perspective, because I was a younger woman in a leadership position.
Hmm.
That's why I was asked to be on these panels, because there weren't very many of us. And every time I did it, women would run up to the stage. When's the next one? And I'm like, the next what? I was just asked to be on this panel. And they're like, well, when are you going to talk again? When are we going to have another opportunity to hear from women leaders? And so my friend and I said, let's just get this going. Let's start it. So I think, being authentic and
Hmm.
being vulnerable in a community of women, where you can share what works, what doesn't, how you showed up, how you overcame things, gives people a lot of strength to try it themselves. And 4 years ago, we started a CEO, COO boot camp,
Wow.
and we uh, fundraised for it and trained 59 women and men of color in the industry. And to date, I believe about 15 have attained the C-suite. So we're tracking them over the years. But that was probably the most important thing for me that came out of this, was that we gave people real skills training, but confidence, which is even more important, to know they could do this too.
I mean, that must feel very fulfilling to see a demand for diversity and those kind of leadership voices, and then go ahead and show people how to make their way to the C-suite.
Yeah, I mean, it's been exciting as
Hmm.
I learn about people who attain different positions
Hmm.
or are trying for positions, um and then they're getting them. We're thrilled about it. Yeah.
As we wrap up, I always like to ask a couple traditional questions,
Hmm.
which is, of course, what is one piece of advice that you have overheard, or that someone has personally told you, that has helped you along your career?
So I think listen to people who see something in you that you don't see in yourself. And I experienced that not wanting to go into management and leadership and refusing to until my job was at risk. And then doing it and finding that leading people, mentoring people, helping people on their career journeys was really more fulfilling for me than writing was. And I didn't know that until I tried it. So I just tell people, don't turn away from input that you think doesn't make sense to you in the moment, because you're never quite sure, and try different things.
Journalism has changed a lot since you first started this industry. Um, I've talked to many students before meeting you today, and on what kind of questions they had for a CEO, and specifically the CEO of KPBS, a news organization that they have been around for so long, surrounded by their student experience, and they kind of had similar questions. One being, what advice do you have specifically for journalism students, as things have changed so much, and what is something attacking journalism today that you hope to fix, and you hope journalism students know?
Well, I think truth never goes out of style. I think that um, while platforms have changed and they're exploding, and that's going to keep happening,
Mm-hmm.
people want to know they can trust the news. They want to know that whether it's in print or audio or video, however they're getting it, that it's trusted. And I would advise, and this is not anything new in my opinion as a journalist, protect that truth. Don't spew misinformation. Check your facts.
Mm-hmm.
Do the work. Put in the work. Don't think that cutting corners no one will notice, because it only takes one time to lose trust.
Yeah.
It only takes one time to put a piece of content out there that isn't accurate, because you were either lazy or thought you could get away with it, or whatever the reason, and you lose trust, and you can never get trust back.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice is, and I say this to the team here all the time, I give 110%. Everyone needs to be giving 110%. If you don't want to do that, you shouldn't be in a truth-telling industry, and you shouldn't be, especially in public media, an industry that the public believes in so much and holds and cherishes. That's a gift, and you need to protect it.
Wonderful. Be transparent, be truthful. Those are journalism ethics.
Yeah.
Do you have do you wish there was any question that I asked you, or anything that you want watchers to leave after this episode?
The only other thing I'd say, and I've said this to my kids who are all grown, when I was in college and I graduated, I felt like I had to get a job right away. I felt like if I did not get a job right away, there would be no job for me. So I went to work 2 weeks after I graduated from college, and I've been working
ever since.
Ever since. And I don't think that's good advice. I think that college is a job in and of itself, and especially if you approached it the way I did, where I had a lot of work. I worked. I was a working journalist while I was in college. People need a break, and there aren't very many phases in your life before retirement that you can take a break, and one of them is between high school and college, and another is between college and work life. And so once you get to work, you do need to give 110%. Yeah. So I just always advise people, if you can, even if it's the summer, take the summer off. And if it's the best job you ever wanted, but they won't let you start till the fall, do you really want to work at, does a month really matter? So I just, I think it's important to put yourself first sometimes.
Understood. Now, last question is there anyone that that has been part of the SDSU JMS program that you think I should talk to that would be a good fit for this podcast?
Yeah, well, the person I was thinking of, and I believe he's in Vegas now as a sports either editor or writer, is Ed Graney.
Okay.
I don't know if you've talked to Ed,
Mm-mm.
but yeah, he's a good guy.
Wonderful. Well, Deanna, thank you so much for
You're
being on this
welcome.
podcast, for chatting with me today, and from becoming a CEO, you know, and moving the next generation of the next C-suite CEOs. Deanna has been committed to women of color, and San Diego for decades. And it's time to say goodbye to your favorite leader's favorite leader. Thank you again, Deanna.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Where Ya At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.